What if the most dangerous thing about a predator isn't that he's terrifying, it's that he's pathetic? That question sits at the heart of Jeanette McCurdy's debut novel, and it's the reason this book has ignited more genuine dinner-table arguments than almost anything published in the last 5 years. Today we're going between the lines to find what this story is actually about and why almost everyone has been sold the wrong premise. Jeanette McCurdy first broke through not as a novelist but as a memoirist. Her 2022 memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, was raw and unflinching: childhood abuse, eating disorders, the entertainment industry eating her alive. It was also written in a very specific style. Clipped, almost impatient sentences, action-forward, barely pausing to breathe. Love it or find it cold, you could feel a survival instinct baked into every line. Her debut novel follows Waldo, a 17-year-old who describes herself as white trash, navigating poverty, an absent mother, and a gravitational pull toward every bad decision available. When her English teacher, Mr. McCurdy, starts paying attention to her writing, something shifts. That's the premise. And that premise is why readers came to this book expecting one type of story and walked away deeply confused. We live in a post-Me Too literary landscape that has produced powerful fiction about predation. But a specific template has emerged: the cold, calculating abuser, the master manipulator. What McCurdy's novel quietly suggests is that this template, while real and important, is incomplete. Most of us who navigated unsafe relationships as teenagers did not encounter a mastermind. We encountered someone far messier, and fiction rarely tells that story. Here is the reframe this book earns: it is not primarily a grooming story, it is an addiction story. Waldo is caught in multiple interlocking cycles: compulsive shopping, binge eating, love addiction, and every one of them follows the same script. A spike of anticipation, a hit, a crash, and an immediate scramble for the next hit. Mr. McCurdy is one more substance. That shift in frame changes everything about how you read every scene. McCurdy's clipped prose, the thing that kept readers at arm's length in the memoir, actually earns its keep here. Waldo isn't reflecting. She's chasing. The sentences mimic addiction: reactive, present tense, always leaning forward. There's a recurring image of Waldo scraping a container dry and immediately reaching for the next one. Junk food so overflavored it splits her tongue, and then the familiar, immediate emptiness. The container is always the wrong shape for what she's actually hungry for. Let me pause here for a second, because this is where the novel does something quiet that gets overlooked. The body does the emotional work the dialogue refuses to. We don't need Waldo to explain her psychology. We watch her eat. We watch her buy. We watch her body tell the truth that her narration is working hard to spin. It's a subtle craft move, and it's one of the book's real strengths. There's a through line in the novel between overconsumption and being consumed. Waldo devours fast food and fast fashion with the same urgency that the men in her life devour her. Each transaction, the shopping haul, the hookup, the stolen attention from McCurdy, shares the same economic structure: short-term satiation, long-term debt. The novel never quite names this parallel, but it lives in the texture of scene after scene, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now we get to the most honest and most uncomfortable thing this book does. Mr. McCurdy is not a mastermind. He is a failed writer, competent enough to teach teenagers, not talented enough to publish. His grooming isn't orchestrated, it's opportunistic. He spots vulnerability in Waldo the way someone spots an unlocked car. He acts, but he also fumbles. He loses his family, loses Waldo, and loses the novel he hoped she'd inspire him to write. He fails at everything, including the harm. I know the reflex is to call that a cop-out, that it minimizes harm, but consider what McCurdy is actually arguing. A pathetic villain is not a lesser villain. McCurdy causes real damage precisely because he lacks the self-awareness to stop himself. He's not calculating enough to be careful. The harm still lands. He just can't articulate why he caused it or fully understand what he did. That uncomfortable ambiguity is closer to most people's lived experience than fiction usually allows. What makes Waldo different from other protagonists in similar stories is genuine agency, and she knows it. She is not flattened into pure victimhood. She wants to be a muse. She also wants her own life. She's aware of some of what she's doing, even when she can't stop doing it. Her successes are small, not redemptions, just small wins, but they are hers and they are consistent. That distinction matters enormously for how the novel sits in your body after you finish it. Compare this to My Dark Vanessa, where the abuser Jacob Waldman is a meticulous architect of manipulation, monstrous precisely because he's brilliant at it. That novel is devastating, and it tells a true and important story. But it describes a statistically rare phenomenon. McCurdy is describing something much more common: harm from someone needy and opportunistic rather than cold and deliberate. Both are real. Fiction has explored one of them far more thoroughly than the other. One of the novel's real weaknesses is how it handles class. White trash is central to Waldo's self-definition, but the material consequences of poverty never quite arrive. Waldo sustains a shopping addiction on a retail salary that shouldn't support one. The financial cliff that should be looming stays permanently offstage. It's a significant missed opportunity because poverty shapes addiction, and the novel gestures at this without committing to it. There's also something quietly sophisticated in how Waldo narrates her own story. She's not lying to us, but she is interpreting events in ways that favor her sense of control. As the relationship deteriorates, the gap widens between what she describes and what we can plainly see is happening. It's an unreliable narrator technique deployed through omission rather than invention. The reader does a lot of work, and for the right reader, that work is exactly the point. And then there's the ending, and I want to be careful here because this is where the book earns its keep most completely. Near the final pages, Waldo's mother relapses. In that moment, Waldo sees herself in her mother for the first time with real clarity. She recognizes the pattern she is in. The mother's relapse foreshadows Waldo's own future relapses. The novel is honest enough not to promise a cure. But Waldo is 17. She has time. And the novel closes on that fragile, specific kind of hope. I bet you didn't clock the name. Waldo, as in Where's Waldo, the figure who exists in plain sight and still can't be found. It is a little on the nose, and the novel is self-aware enough to almost acknowledge it. But the metaphor holds. Waldo has been visible this entire time. Her pain is visible. The adults around her just aren't looking in the right frame, or don't want to be. Here's the moment that genuinely surprised me most about the reception to this book. In mixed reading groups, some male readers have reported recognizing something of themselves in Corgi, not as deliberate predators, but as people who once took advantage of someone's vulnerability without framing it that way at the time. That is a specific kind of literary mirror. It doesn't excuse behavior, it illuminates it. And that illumination is rarer than it should be in this genre. So what the novel is ultimately arguing is this: we need a bigger vocabulary for harm. The harm that comes from someone cold and deliberate is one kind. The harm that comes from someone needy and opportunistic, someone who fumbles into causing damage, is another kind entirely. It's statistically more common. It's harder to explain to people who weren't there. And it rarely gets its own story told with this degree of empathy for the person caught in the middle of it. When you read this as an addiction novel first and a grooming story second, everything shifts. Waldo's compulsive eating isn't a character quirk, it's the map of her psychology, drawn in real time. Corgi's failures aren't anticlimactic, they are the point. And the ending isn't ambiguous, it's honest. Addiction means relapse, recognition, and the slow grinding work of pattern breaking. The novel knows this. It just trusts the reader to meet it there, without explanation. This is not a perfect novel. The prose needs room to breathe. The socioeconomic reality needs more teeth. There are moments that are too on the nose and at least one line that has no business being there. But imperfect books can still do something rare, and this one does. It made at least one young adult feel seen in an experience that most fiction either sentimentalizes or turns into pure horror. That's not nothing. That might actually be the hardest thing fiction can do. If this reframe changed how you're thinking about Waldo's story, our video on My Dark Vanessa makes a fascinating companion piece. Same terrain, different emotional architecture entirely, one trusts the reader with ambiguity, the other trusts the reader with devastation. Both are asking hard questions, they just believe in different readers. Link is up top. We'll see you between the lines.